The rain had been falling over the gentle hills of western Pennsylvania for 3 days straight when the silence finally broke. It was not a loud break, but a quiet, shattering fracture in a life that Eleanor had built with meticulous care for 42 years. The house, a sturdy Victorian structure that had weathered blizzards and heat waves alike, felt different tonight. It felt empty. For the first time in 4 decades, the heavy oak coat rack in the hallway did not hold the weight of Thomas's canvas jacket. The smell of his pipe tobacco, usually a comforting embrace that greeted her at the door, now hung in the air like a ghost, stale and fading. Eleanor sat at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea that had gone cold an hour ago. She was 72 years old, a woman of practical habits and stoic resolve. She was the kind of woman who ironed sheets, who wrote thank you notes the day after Christmas, and who never asked questions that she didn't want the answers to. But tonight, with the rhythmic drumming of the rain against the window pane and the oppressive quiet of the empty house, the questions were screaming in her mind. Thomas was at the County General Hospital, 10 miles away. A stroke, that was the word the doctor had used. A sharp, clinical monosyllable that severed their reality into before and after. He was stable, they said, but he was sleeping deeply, his mind wandering in places Eleanor could not follow. When the paramedics had taken him, in the chaos of flashing lights and static-filled radios, they had handed Eleanor his personal effects in a clear plastic bag. His watch, his wedding ring, and the contents of his pockets. She looked at the pile of items sitting on the floral tablecloth. A crumpled handkerchief, 3 peppermint candies, a small pocket knife, and a key. It was an old key, heavy and made of tarnished brass, with a head shaped like a clover. Eleanor knew every key in this house. She knew the silver key for the front door, the small jagged key for the back porch, the tiny keys for the china cabinet. She knew the spare key hidden under the rock in the garden, but she did not know this one. It did not look like a house key. It looked older, purposeful, a key designed to keep something heavy and significant locked away. For 42 years, Eleanor had told herself she had a perfect marriage. Thomas was a good man. He was a provider, a man who worked at the lumber yard for 30 years without a single sick day. He was a father who taught their 2 sons, David and Michael, how to fish in the creek and how to change a tire. He was a husband who never raised his voice, who ate her pot roast every Sunday with gratitude, and who sat beside her in the pew at the First Baptist Church every week. But there was a shadow that Eleanor had learned to walk around, to ignore, to pretend wasn't there. It was the shadow of the garage, detached from the house, sitting at the end of a long gravel driveway, was Thomas's workshop. It was a converted barn, weathered and gray. Every evening after dinner, Thomas would stand up, wipe his mouth with his napkin, and say the same thing. "I'm going to go tinker for a bit, Ellie." walk out into the dark. He would stay there for exactly 90 minutes. Not an hour, not 2 hours, 90 minutes. In the early years, she had offered to bring him coffee. He had stopped her at the door, his body blocking the entrance, a strange panic in his eyes. "No, Ellie, it's dusty. It's no place for you. I need to concentrate." He had installed a heavy padlock on the door in 1974. He said it was because of the expensive tools. But Eleanor knew they didn't have expensive tools. They had a hammer, a saw, and a drill. She had let it be. Every marriage has its secrets, her mother had told her. A man needs a cave. A man needs a place to be alone with his thoughts. So, she let him have his 90 minutes. She let him have his padlock. She convinced herself he was building birdhouses, or fixing toasters, or perhaps just sitting in silence, escaping the noise of raising 2 boisterous boys, but holding the brass key now, with Thomas lying unconscious in a hospital bed. The heavy blanket of denial began to lift. She remembered the nights he came back from the garage smelling not of sawdust, but of something metallic and sharp. She remembered the times she saw him through the kitchen window, standing outside the garage door before entering, taking a deep breath as if he were a diver preparing to go underwater. She remembered how, when the boys were little and tried to play near the garage, Thomas had yelled the only time he ever yelled, scaring them so badly they never went near it again. Eleanor stood up. Her knees popped, a reminder of her age, but her hands were steady. She took the key. She put on her raincoat, pulling the hood up over her silver hair. She stepped out into the stormy night. The rain lashed against her face, cold and unforgiving. The gravel crunched under her boots, a sound that seemed deafening in the night. The garage loomed ahead, a dark silhouette against the darker sky. It looked like a tomb. She reached the door. Her hand trembled as she lifted the heavy iron padlock. She inserted the brass key. It slid in with a smooth, well-oiled click. Thomas had maintained this lock better than he maintained his own health. She turned it. The mechanism gave way. Eleanor hesitated. A voice in her head, the voice of the frightened young bride she had been in 1968, whispered to her, "Don't do it. Go back inside. Make tea. Forget this. If you open this door, you cannot close it again." She thought of Thomas's face in the hospital, pale and slack. She thought of the distance that had always existed between them, a thin sheet of glass she could never quite break through. She wanted to know who she had married. She pulled the door open. It groaned on its hinges, a low, mournful sound. The air that rushed out to meet her was cold and dry. It didn't smell like a workshop. It didn't smell like sawdust or oil or gasoline. It smelled of old paper, wax, and something sterile, like rubbing alcohol. Eleanor stepped inside and fumbled for the light switch. A single naked bulb in the center of the high ceiling flickered to life, casting harsh shadows into the corners. The garage was not a workshop. There were no workbenches cluttered with tools. There were no piles of lumber. The floor was swept clean, immaculate concrete. In the center of the room sat a single, comfortable armchair facing the back wall. Next to the chair was a small table with a lamp, a bottle of rubbing alcohol, a roll of sterile gauze, and a small metal basin. And covering the walls, every inch of the wooden walls, from the floor to the rafters, were photographs. Eleanor's breath caught in her throat. She walked forward, her legs feeling like lead. Hundreds, perhaps thousands of photographs were pinned to the wood. They were not photos of their family. They were black and white photos, grainy and high contrast. They were photos of landscapes, jungle landscapes, rice paddies, low mountains shrouded in mist, young men in fatigues sitting on sandbags, helicopters hovering over tree lines. Thomas had been in Vietnam. He had been drafted in 1967, just before they met. He had come back in 1969 with a Purple Heart and a limp that vanished after a year, but a silence that never did. He never talked about the war. It was a job, he would say. I did it, and I came home. But the walls told a different story. The walls screamed of a memory that had never ended. Eleanor moved closer to the back wall, the one the chair was facing. Here, the photos were different. They weren't landscapes. They were portraits. Dozens of portraits of the same young man. A boy, really. He had dark hair, a wide smile with a chipped front tooth, and eyes that looked too kind for a uniform. In some photos, he was laughing, holding a can of soda. In others, he was asleep in a hammock. In one, he was standing arm in arm with Thomas. Young Thomas looked at the camera with a guarded expression, but the boy, this stranger, looked at Thomas with pure adoration. Underneath the central photo of this boy, pinned to the wall, was a letter. The paper was yellowed and brittle, preserved in a plastic sleeve. Eleanor leaned in, squinting to read the faded handwriting. Dearest Tommy, don't you worry about the patrol tomorrow. I've got a feeling we're going to be just fine. When we get back to the world, you're going to take me to that diner you talk about in Pennsylvania, and I'm going to order 3 milkshakes. You're my brother, Tom, more than blood. We make it out together, or not at all. Sam. Eleanor felt a tear slide down her cheek. Sam. She had never heard the name. 42 years, and she had never heard the name Sam. She turned her attention to the small table beside the chair. The rubbing alcohol, the gauze. Why? She opened the single drawer of the table. Inside was a leather-bound journal. It wasn't old. It was current. The last entry was dated 3 days ago, the day before the stroke. Eleanor opened it. Thomas's handwriting was shaky, the script of an old man, but the words were clear. October 14th. The pain was bad today. It feels like fire. I think the infection is coming back, deep in the bone. I cleaned it for an hour. I looked at Sam's face while I did it. It helps. The Pain is TH. Part 2, Characters. 8956. E-Price, isn't it? I'm here, breathing the air, smelling the rain. Sam is in the ground. The pain is how I remember. I can't let Ellie see. She would want me to go to the doctor. She would want to fix it. She doesn't understand that I don't want it fixed. I need to keep it. It's the only thing I have left of that day. Eleanor dropped the journal. Her hands were shaking violently now. She looked at the basin. There were traces of dried blood at the bottom. She suddenly understood. The long sleeves. Thomas always wore long sleeves, even in the humid heat of July. He wore flannel shirts buttoned to the cuffs. He never swam with the boys. He changed in the bathroom with the door locked. She thought the scars on his arm were just that, scars. Old wounds from shrapnel that had healed over white and shiny. But the journal spoke of infection. It spoke of cleaning. Thomas wasn't just hiding a memory. He was hiding a wound that he refused to let heal. He was nursing a physical pain to match the hole in his soul. He believed that his suffering was a penance for surviving when Sam had not. Eleanor sank into the armchair, Thomas's chair. She sat where he had sat for 40 years. She looked up at the wall of faces. She saw the jungle through his eyes. She saw the humidity, the fear, the camaraderie. And she saw the love, a profound, desperate brotherhood that had been ripped away in a moment of violence. She realized then how lonely he must have been. He had come home to her, to a soft bed, to warm meals, to a world that wanted to forget the war. But part of him had stayed in that jungle. And every night, for 90 minutes, he went back there. He went back to be with Sam. He went back to punish himself for being alive. He had locked the door not to keep her out, but to protect her. To protect her from the ugliness of his trauma. To keep his darkness from tainting the light of their home. He wanted to be the perfect husband for her. So he locked the broken soldier in the garage. Eleanor wept. She wept for Sam, the boy she never knew. She wept for Thomas, the husband she thought she knew. And she wept for herself, for the 42 years of silence that had stood between them. The storm raged outside, pounding against the metal roof of the garage. But inside, Eleanor felt a strange calm settling over her. The secret was out. The ghost had been named. She stood up. She took the photo of Thomas and Sam arm in arm. She took the journal. She turned off the light, leaving the shrine in darkness, and walked back out into the rain. The next morning, the sun broke through the clouds, bathing the wet world in a brilliant, cleansing light. Eleanor walked into the hospital room. Thomas was awake. He looked small in the hospital bed, frail against the white sheets. His eyes, usually sharp, were hazy with confusion and medication. When he saw Eleanor, he tried to smile, but it was lopsided. "Ellie," he rasped. "Water." She held the straw to his lips. He drank greedily. Then his eyes drifted to her coat, which she had draped over the chair. He saw the pocket. He saw the outline of the brass key. Panic, sharp and sudden, seized his features. The monitors beside the bed beeped faster. "Ellie," he whispered, his voice trembling. "The key, did you go?" Eleanor didn't say a word. She pulled the chair close to the bed. She sat down and took his hand. His hand was rough, calloused, the hand of a worker. She turned it over and gently pushed up the sleeve of his hospital gown. There, on his forearm, was the scar. It was angry, red, and inflamed. It was not a healed wound. It was a wound that had been picked at, reopened, kept raw for decades. Thomas tried to pull his arm away, tears welling in his eyes. Shame, deep and agonizing, flooded his face. "I'm sorry," he choked out. "I'm so sorry, Ellie. I didn't want you to know. I'm broken. I'm crazy. I know I am." Eleanor held his arm firm. She didn't look away. She reached into her purse and pulled out the photograph of him and Sam. She placed it on the crisp white sheet between them. Thomas stopped breathing for a moment. He looked at the photo, then at Eleanor. He waited for her anger. He waited for her disgust. He waited for her to ask why he had loved a ghost more than he had loved her. But Eleanor did none of those things. She leaned forward and kissed the angry, red scar on his arm. She kissed it with a tenderness that defied 40 years of secrets. "His name was Sam," Eleanor said softly. It wasn't a question. Thomas let out a sob, a sound that seemed to tear itself from the bottom of his lungs. "Yes, Sam. He saved me, Ellie. He pushed me into the chopper, and he didn't make it. It should have been me." "But it wasn't you, Thomas," Eleanor said, her voice firm and iron strong. "It was you who came home. It was you who raised David and Michael. It was you who loved me." "I haven't been all here," Thomas confessed, tears streaming down his face into his ears. "Part of me is still there, in the mud, with him." "I know," Eleanor said. She stroked his gray hair. "And that's okay. We can go visit him. But Thomas, look at me." He looked at her, really looked at her, defenseless and open for the first time since 1969. "You don't have to bleed for him anymore," she whispered. "He wouldn't want that. That letter. He wanted you to have milkshakes. He wanted you to live. You've been paying a debt that was already forgiven." Thomas closed his eyes. His body shook. He cried for the boy with the chipped tooth. He cried for the years he had spent in that garage. He cried for the relief of finally letting the burden drop. Eleanor sat with him through the tears. She sat with him until he fell asleep, exhausted but peaceful. The recovery was slow. The stroke had taken some of his mobility, but the doctors were optimistic. The infection in his arm was treated, properly treated with antibiotics and care. The doctors were puzzled by the nature of the chronic wound, but Eleanor simply told them it was an old war injury that had flared up. She protected his dignity, just as he had tried to protect her peace. 3 months later, Thomas was home. He walked with a cane now, leaning heavily on Eleanor. One crisp autumn evening, just as the sun was dipping below the hills, painting the sky in purples and oranges, Thomas stopped in the kitchen. He looked at the back door. It was the time he usually went to the garage. He looked at Eleanor. She was washing dishes. She turned off the water and dried her hands. "I think," Thomas said, his voice stronger than it had been in years, "I think I'd like to unlock the door today." "Okay," Eleanor said. They walked out together. The air was smelling of fallen leaves. They reached the garage. The padlock was gone. Eleanor had removed it weeks ago. They walked inside. The photos were still there. The shrine was still there, but the rubbing alcohol and the basin were gone. Eleanor had removed them. Thomas stood in the center of the room. He looked at Sam's face. He didn't look away. "I missed so much time with you," Thomas said to Eleanor, not taking his eyes off the wall. 90 minutes a day. For 40 years. That's years of my life I stole from us. We have today, Eleanor said, and we have tomorrow. Thomas turned to her. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the brass key. He held it out to her. "I don't want to lock it anymore," he said. "I want to bring the boys in here. I want to tell them about Sam. I want you to know him." Eleanor closed her hand over his, over the key. "I would like that very much, Tom. I'd like to know the man who saved my husband's life." They spent the evening in the garage, but this time, the door was propped wide open. The autumn breeze drifted in, carrying the sounds of the crickets and the distant bark of a dog. Thomas talked. He talked until his voice was hoarse. He told her about the heat, the smell of the rain in the jungle, the taste of the canned peaches they shared. He told her about the fear. He told her about the laughter. And as he spoke, Eleanor saw the ghosts on the wall begin to change. They stopped being haunting spirits of trauma and started being memories cherished, honored, and finally peaceful. That night, for the first time in 42 years, Thomas did not go to sleep with a heavy heart. He lay in bed next to Eleanor, the moon casting a silver square of light across the quilt. "Ellie," he whispered into the dark. "Yes, Tom. Thank you for finding the key." Eleanor reached out and took his hand in the darkness. His arm was bandaged, finally healing. "Good night, Tom. Good night, Ellie." The house was quiet, but it was no longer empty. It was full of truth, full of forgiveness, and finally, truly full of love. The rain had stopped, and the silence that followed was not one of secrets, but of peace.